Hey everybody, today I'd like to talk just a few minutes with you about the excluded middle. I really like this chapter from Paul Hebert, where he identifies the fact that in Western thought, many times we categorize things in one of two ways. We either place things in the category of what he calls high religion, or we place things in the category of science or natural science. And many things take place in people's lives that they are not sure how to categorize, and neither are we. And they fall in between those two, and so Hebert calls that the excluded middle. The reason he calls it the excluded middle is because in our Western thought, we really don't have room for it. We don't have a way that we can acknowledge it. We tend to think of things in sort of two-dimensional categories, and it's either high religion or it's science, and it can't be in between. It's got to be one or the other. And Hebert is trying to help us understand in the way people experience their lives and reflect on their experiences. This is not really limited to two categories, at least in real life, the way people think through things. Let me give you, for example, in the United States, an example. Think about people who, maybe you yourself have said this or heard other people say it. They talk about a dead relative. They talk about their mother or their father or their grandmother or their grandfather. And they talk about them looking down on them from above. And, today is the 20th anniversary of the year of my mother's death, and she still looks down on me from above, and I don't know what I would do without her guidance and inspiration. And I listen to her every day. And you can see posts on Facebook about this kind of thing. You can hear people talk about this kind of thing sometimes in their everyday conversation. And it's just a reality in the life of many people, or I will say some people, in the United States. Now, when we think about, how to process this as Christians, a question I would like to ask is, how is this different from what we would call ancestor worship? I mean, how do you distinguish between ancestor appreciation, receiving ancestor guidance, and what we would prefer to call, at least in our Western thought, or at least in our Western thought as Christians, ancestor worship? And we only worship God, right? We don't worship our ancestors, but we do appreciate them, and in a sense, they guide us because we remember things they've taught us in the past. One of my father's favorite sayings was, if a job is doing, it's worth doing right. My father and mother both were constantly telling me to watch out for fish bones when I was eating fish. And my mother's been dead for, she died in 1972. So she's been dead a long time. My father died in 2004. So he's been dead a while. And whenever I eat fish now, every once in a while, the thought crosses through my mind, don't worry, Daddy, I'm watching out for the bones. Or whenever I was using a knife, my father would teach me to cut away from myself so that I'm not cutting toward myself with a sharp blade. And every once in a while, if I'm in the kitchen using a knife, I'll find myself saying, don't worry, Daddy, the knife blade is away from me. Now, I know Daddy's not here, and I know I don't worship him, but in a sense, he is still guiding me because I remember things that he taught me in the past. So the importance of the notion of the excluded middle is that if we keep all of these things excluded in our thinking, then when people experience them in their lives and reflect on them in their lives and express them in their lives in these ways, then we in the church have no way to bring solid biblical resources to bear on their experiences, on their discussions, on their conversations. There's nothing we can contribute because we've tried to exclude it. We've tried to say, we've tried to ignore it because it doesn't fall easily into science. Neither does it fall easily into what we would call our pure religion, because we're not going to worship our Father, right? But it's still a reality for us. As human beings. So that's why this concept is so important. Let me give you another example. I just want to make sure you understand that in American culture, this sometimes sneaks up on us, and we're just not even aware of it. So that's why I want to give you some examples and talk about it a little bit. Think about animal lovers. Some of you may be animal lovers. You may know animal lovers. I'm an animal liker. I like animals. I've had pets in the past. We don't have pets now because we travel too much in our mission work back and forth from Venezuela and Costa Rica and other locales, so there's no way we could have a pet. but I'm not an animal lover. I'm not a rescue person. For example, I have a relative who rescues horses and min pins. I'm not that kind of a person. And so I won't be able to think this through exactly the same way one of those people would, but I've seen so many of my friends who are animal lovers post on Facebook, Smokey died today and crossed the Rainbow Bridge. Well, what is the Rainbow Bridge? Is the Rainbow Bridge a biblical concept? Is it a non-biblical concept? Well, whatever it is, we know that it's getting at something that is important to people who love animals. And if we keep that in the excluded middle and never find a way to talk about it, then we have nothing to contribute in terms of biblical resources to these people who are experiencing the death of a beloved animal. So that's why this concept of the excluded middle is so important. We must realize that if we continue to exclude these things that people experience in their lives, or at least that people think about as they experience things in their lives, then we will have nothing to contribute to the conversation. We won't be able to influence the way they think about it, etc. So the excluded middle is a very important concept. And I just really want to, I know you can't do it now while you're in school, but at some point early in your ministry after you get through with school, I want to encourage you to reread Hebert's chapter. It really is one of the best chapters that you could read for this kind of thing. I found it so helpful in my ministry in Venezuela, where there are Christians where it's a culture where people actually have family altars in their homes with pictures of their ancestors. There's 5% of the people in Venezuela actually participate actively in witchcraft. That they're experiencing some things that we would put in the excluded middle. To them, they're not in the middle at all. Those are things that are very real to them. And so this chapter really helped me be aware of how the way I think as a Westerner and the way I try to categorize things into either, okay, that's true godly religion or that's science. And I want to say nothing can fall between the cracks. Well, in fact, in real life, sometimes things do fall between the cracks, and therefore they end up in the excluded middle. And I need to be able to talk about them with solid theology and solid biblical resources. And so I encourage you to do the same. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. God bless.